you come along and you do something, and it's good, but it's different, they try to shun it for a while, but neither one of us would go away. So that's
it.
That's the good part. We weren't smart enough to go chose another profession.
Yeah, we just kind of stuck with it.
Yeah. Making art is the only thing that I can do for 24 hours, and it's just like I had 12 hours of sleep to this day. In fact, I've been up all night now making art.
I've always wanted to be an artist. Even when I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist. I don't know exactly how that started, except for maybe because my oldest sister was a painter. She painted all the time when I was growing up in the house, and her spot was like always this really neat spot. It smelled really good, and I always had a lot of admiration for what she did, and I think that's part of why I always wanted to be an artist.
I've been drawing and marking and writing on things since I can remember. I never dreamed of being nothing else but a person that made art.
When I'm making art, I feel very happy, like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in the world. When I'm not making art, I feel like I'm not doing what I need to be doing in the world.
It's tricky when the folks say, how do you make a living? How do you make a living breathing? But we breathe. You see, how do we make a living drinking water? But we drink water. So how do we make a living making art? I don't know, we just make art. I'm a painter by profession, and I came to sculpture out of the love of the media. And so I love to carve. Everything I do is sculpture, whether I'm tap dancing or singing. It's still three-dimensional to me. And I don't do art for art's sake. I don't do abstraction for art's sake, but I do abstraction for conversation. So everything I do ought to generate a conversation. I don't care if they like it or not, as long as they're talking about it. That's what the piece is meant to do, is to generate conversation. If you look at all of my art, if you take a piece home with you, you better be ready to talk about it, because somebody gonna sure walk in and ask you, where in the hell did you get that from?
I was in a small town, Delphi is the name of the town, and I was sitting at a lunch counter photographing, talking to some people, and I was ready to leave, and one of the fellows said, well, you know, you really got to go get some water because we have the best water. Make sure you get some water before you go home. And so he gave me directions. I drove to this little town, which was called Pittsburgh, which there was nothing there anymore. I mean, I don't even think there might have been a restaurant, but it was closed. But there was a cross on the road, and there was a pipe sticking out of the ground with water running out of it. It wasn't very pretty at all. And there were cars lined up, and people were getting water from this water source. And I was just kind of blown away. I didn't realize that people could get water out of the ground in Indiana and drink it, and that it was safe. And then I also wondered why these people were getting the water and going to so much trouble getting the water in the middle of winter. And then I started to plan this project where I traveled around and photographed them. I wanted to kind of find out more about the culture that surrounded them. I photograph both the people and the spots. So the people I usually talk to and I interview, and it's a little bit hectic because I'm doing video and photography at the same time, so I usually have a video camera on a tripod, and then I will take some pictures, and eventually if the person seems willing to talk, I'll ask them if they want to be on video. So it's a little bit hectic, and sometimes I'm not really sure, you know, what I'm getting at the time until I get back and look at it.
The problem was I grew up in Mississippi, and we didn't know nobody that made a living as an artist. We understood doctors and lawyers and engineers and nurses and janitors and sanitation workers. We understood all of those jobs, but we didn't understand art as a job.
I was really interested in photography, and my high school didn't offer photography, but my art teacher, he let me use the darkroom in the shop room of the high school, and so I taught myself how to take pictures and develop pictures, and I got a portfolio together, and I really wanted to go to art school.
I remember when I got to be a senior in high school, my mom walked in and she looked at me, and I had just won something, or just painted something that I thought was the greatest thing since cheese. And she took one look at me and said, yeah.
I really wanted to go to RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, but I didn't think that I was good enough to get in. I didn't think I had enough skill, so instead I went to Creighton University because my father said that he would pay for school if we went to Catholic school.
And she gave me my choice. If I went to school, went to college and majored in medicine or whatever, they would mortgage the house. But if I went to school and majored in art, I was on my own. And at 18, I looked at her and said, thank you. I'll major in art and I'll be on my own.
I thought, okay, that's where I'll go. But as soon as I got there, didn't like it. It was mostly pre-med and pre-dental and didn't have much of an art scene. So I worked on my portfolio, and then I got accepted into RISD, and I went to RISD.
I left Mississippi, came up to Chicago, and I thought that once I got a degree, that money would just come rolling down the alley. It just don't happen that way.
I had no idea what people thought about people in the Midwest who lived on the East Coast until I moved there, and then I realized that there was this really kind of, I don't know if disdain is a word, but just kind of writing off of everyone who lived like between the coasts. I mean, it seems like a stereotype, but it really was an attitude that I felt a lot.
My oldest child was born severely mentally retarded, and I was very instrumental in his life. Okay, I was very instrumental in his life. And so I went to work full-time, I went to school full-time. And then when I graduated, I ended up working full-time, and then because I worked 40 hours a week, I tried to make art 40 hours a week. So I never had time to run the streets, I never had time to sit in bars and do all of the other terrible things that's attributed to artists. I didn't have time to do those things because I love my family and I love making art.
And I moved back to Walkerton, where I was raised, because my parents were not in very good health, and I was only a single person in my family, so I thought, why not? I'll move back up here. Another kind of motivating factor was that I wanted to move back here and photograph things that I knew and tell the story about, this area. If I was living somewhere else and coming here and visiting, I wouldn't have the same access. When I lived in Walkerton, I had so much access to my subject. I mean, I could just go in the car and drive a little bit and find, things I wanted to photograph, and it was very easy to keep up that routine of photographing because I was right there in the middle of it.
The series that I'm working on now, a friend of mine, David Casper, Dad had to take down some trees on the property, and so out of that, the two of us ended up with about 10 logs that range from 6 feet to about 12 feet, that I'm gonna do a series of sculpture relating to the family, since he comes from a close-knit family, and I love to talk about family and write about family. So this is a tribute to David Casper and the wonderful family that he come from. since I have a general theme in my mind, what I want to do, as an artist, my first priority is to come up with an interesting composition. It has nothing to do with race, religion, politics, or money at this point. It's just how do I take this damn blank log and make a piece of sculpture out of it.
I think we have a similar kind of
Taste,
yeah.
Attitudes, and I think that's where we really come together.
I think it's fair to say we both kind of had played kind of an outsider kind of role in the art world in a way, because neither one of us are affiliated with big institutions, or, you know, neither one of us chose that path. And so trying to make a career, kind of defining it yourself, which is sometimes, you know, we have that in common.
In the early days, all we had to do is the sun shining like this, and we just get in the car and just drive. I think I've been on every back road in Indiana and Michigan. I think I've been on every back road, okay, because of her. And then when she was shooting the Small Town series, and we go to, I'd never heard of a swap meet, okay?
An animal swap meet.
This is what I mean.
They're really strange places.
And she'll say, come on, we're going to a swap meet. And I'm going to myself, swap meet? How the hell she hear about a swap meet? And then when I come back, because I love to tell stories, folks say, he ought to quit lying. But I be telling the truth. Chicken bingo. Had never heard of no chicken bingo.
In Francisville, they have chicken bingo.
Yeah.
And they also have mouse roulette every year at Stark County Fair, where they have a roulette and they have a mouse in a box. They let the mouse out, and wherever the hole, that's where you get you win your money. And they only use field mice because white mice are too tame, so they have to use field mice, and they have like many field mice. They go through field mice. And they still have this. They have this at the Stark County Fair.
And then my favorite photograph that she's ever taken is the little kid sitting there with the little fan, and he just like, and when he figured out that Kay was taking his picture, he really got cute, and he just took that fan.
The first time I visited Cuba, I really didn't take any pictures that I used, because it takes me a while to kind of figure out what I want to photograph about a place. But then on return trips, I had definite ideas of what I want to photograph. I decided I wanted to do this project on the Malecón, which is a seawall in Havana where people go. It's a very romantic spot. People go there and to be with their boyfriend or girlfriend, because there's not a lot of privacy in Cuba. The families live together, extended families live together. And it's also kind of a spot where people party. And I went to take them at night with a flash. So I had this whole series of people sitting on the wall, so there was this constant kind of, you know, look about them, and the wall had a lot of texture, and the flash lit it up really nice at night, and then there was this black background. And I printed them on this paper that doesn't exist anymore, but it's like a nice warm tone.
Say the last 10 or 15 years, where I haven't done nothing but made art, it has been very, very difficult, because first of all, folks say I'm black and I don't make art, or I'm black and my art is not as good as, or I'm black and my art shouldn't cost this much as. So I have all of these things working against me just because of race. And then when I say I'm a sculptor, then folks think that, okay, you're a sculptor, so that means you just pick up a stick and you start whittling. And I go, no, not true. I know how to whittle, but everything I do is planned, is calculated, and there's a series of things that's involved. This is the types of drawing that I really do for sculpture. And you can see I add everything into the wet paint, because I'm not a painter, I'm a sculptor, so my paintings really have to become sculpture. And so when I'm really painting, I'm really thinking three-dimensional. Never do I think of two-dimensional. I could care less about the shadow. I'm more concerned about the shapes and the movements of those shapes. And this is another type of drawing for sculpture. And this is what I mean when I say I work abstract. I work abstractly in the true sense of the meaning. I always take something real and break it down to its basic parts and then rearrange those parts back together. So I am really an abstract artist. And most times folks think when you're an abstract artist, you don't draw. I draw well. I'm just a sculptor that takes a hell of a long time to sculpt.
I wanted to live in the community where I was taking these pictures and be accountable to the community. I feel like a problem in photography is like sometimes there's a lack of accountability of the photographer to the subject. So I wanted to work as sort of a photojournalist style, documentary style, and be totally immersed in the culture. These are stamp machines that used to sell stamps in like grocery stores and in post offices. And at some point in the 70s, they stopped using them and they ended up in the bars, and now they're used for gambling for tip boards. What you do is you put your quarter in the stamp machine and you get out a little ticket, pull it up, and if it's got the right fruit on it, you get money back. The title is Drop Coins Slowly, which is basically the theme of these things. You have to put in 1 quarter at a time, pull the lever. If you put in too many quarters, the machine gets all jammed up and you can't use it. So a lot of them have little notes about put in 1 quarter at a time or drop coins slowly. So the little handwritten notes are part of, I think, the story that I'm incorporating into the project. Then the other thing that I love about them is they don't work very well anymore. So you'll see a lot of them will have like one of the slots covered with duct tape or with a Band-Aid. There's one that has a couple that have Band-Aids over the slots that don't work. And so when I'm looking at all that, I think it tells a story, you know, a story about what happens in those bars and what happens in those places. And so that's sort of what I'm trying to address in these pictures.
To this day, I think I'm one of the most insulted persons in town. And it's all because of race, religion, and friends that I associate with. And what I mean by that is that black folks look at me and say, you make black art. And then when I go, my dad is black, my mama's black, so I better be black. So that has nothing to do with me making art. I just make art. Sometimes white museum directors and curators think I ought to be doing what they think black art is, because they have narrowly defined a role for me. And I don't fit that role because I studied in Europe and North Africa and New York and Chicago and South Bend, Mississippi and Kentucky, Tennessee, just like everybody else. And so I have a right to bring my experiences to what I do.
I was always juggling my time and my projects, and there were a lot of things that I couldn't do because of my full-time job. A lot of promotion that I couldn't do for my own work, and because you can make it, but you also have to promote it. There's like so many pieces to being an artist besides just making art.
When I had to work, and especially when my kids was growing up, so I had to go do something else because I couldn't explain to them when there wasn't no food on the table. I couldn't explain to them when I couldn't buy new shoes for them when they needed them. So I taught school. And so I paid my dues. I took care of my family as best I could and made sure they had the best that I could afford. Okay. And in fact, all my kids are grown now, but we still have that relationship. I have to remind them that their job now is to take care of me. It doesn't work out that way. But we get along. We love it. They love it. And they love that I make art now.
We're going to RBI's, which is in Mishawaka, and RBI's has a little stamp machine. I started the project this winter because we had such a horrible winter, and I wanted to have a photo project that I could do locally, didn't have to drive very far. And I was pretty low on funds, you know, I'm not, especially during Christmas is kind of my low time because as an adjunct teacher, you don't really get paid for the time that you don't teach, right? So I decided to use my digital camera because I didn't have to put any money into that project. I could just start shooting it. I didn't have to buy film. I didn't even have to develop negatives or anything. I could just start working on the projects. And plus I wanted to work on it in color. I can't afford to do color film photography. I can only really do black and white. To me, they're a series of portraits of these stamp machines. So I get like a nice soft type of portrait light on them. And I want to keep the lighting real consistent. And then I'm trying to get a little bit of the surroundings that tell you what goes on. And I always get this question, why don't you take pictures of people when you're in the bars? They're so much more interesting than the machines. But I think the machines tell a story of their own, especially when you see them in a big, large group.
I had my grandsons in the Indianapolis Museum a couple of months ago, and it was thrilling to see them see my shit hanging on the wall. And then when I told them they couldn't go take it off the wall because I didn't own it anymore, they were pissed. Because when they come here, they kicked it under the bed and rolled it over the floor and they done what they want with it. And it was fine, you see. But now it's a big difference. Now Daddy don't own that no more. Granddaddy don't own that no more, so you can't go mess with it. So.
The art gallery came from me because, like I said, I wanted to start a community. And I wanted to quit my job and start working in art full time. And I'm thinking, how can I maybe make some type of income for myself? Being raised on a farm, my folks always were in business for themselves. They never worked for anyone else. So I just always wanted to have my own business, I guess, and have it be a creative business. And Jake and I have both, for years, worked in different galleries and artist co-ops, and we were always putting on shows and bringing people together, and I just wanted to do it myself. I wanted to start a community here. It was really important to me, if I was going to stay here, to have a community, because otherwise it's just not interesting enough. Jake was kind of dragged into this because he really doesn't want to spend any more time outside of his art. That's been probably the bigger struggle than the fact that we're two artists, is the fact that I started this thing, which takes an enormous amount of both of our resources and time.
We don't care if you're gay, we don't care if you're straight, we don't care if you're from Elkhart County or St. Joe County, from Detroit to Evansville, from Chicago to Fort Wayne. We have shown folks that we respect their art because all we ask is that they bring us their best, and that's what they've brought us.
My exposure to artists because of Art Post has brought in a lot of opportunities I didn't have before. And just opportunity to have conversations with other photographers. I've made a lot of good connections with other photographers and other artists. But it's brought a community that I was really looking for, and in this area it's really kind of hard to find an art community unless you're associated with a university. If you don't have that community, you don't get a lot of validation for being an artist, for one. I mean, I'm not really getting a lot of economic validation, but having the community, an art community where you can have people who value and understand what you're trying to do is like priceless. It really is. It's an important thing to have.
Every now and then, there are some wonderful folks that come along that like what I do and they buy it. And you have to buy what I make. I'm not a commission artist. I'm not a commercial artist. I'm a fine artist in every sense of the word. So you have to buy what I make. But please don't come and ask me to make a walking stick. It ain't gonna happen. If my walking sticks don't come out of me making art, then it ain't gonna happen.
Right now, it's this big balancing act. I'm teaching somewhat, I'm doing some web design on the side, and trying to sell photography and trying to sell art at Art Post. So there's all these different streams of revenue, and none of them are very stable.
For me, money is not the end all, because I just never had it. So I don't miss it, but when I have it, I don't mind spending it. And when I need something, I always find a way to get it.
I'm always kind of trying to figure out how I can fund my next project. And my next, I have this new project that I want to start working on, and I'm trying to figure out how am I going to be able to fund this next project.
This is not a hobby, it is a way of life. And I think I was gifted at other things, so I could have done other things, but I stopped doing other things just to make art. And that's what I love to do. I'm happy. At 65, I don't complain anymore. I don't try to justify what I'm doing anymore. I just do it.
I'm really interested in slowing time down lately. I want to change my camera, I want to walk to my projects. I just want to kind of slow time down a little bit and spend a bit more time focusing on my subject.
I tried making $1 million, it didn't work. I ain't mad with nobody, I ain't upset with nobody. Now I just want to make 1 million pieces of art. That's my goal. When I die, I want somebody to come here and start counting.
They always say, small towns have more eccentric people, but they just stand out more in a small town. Because every place has eccentric people, but I think in a small town they just stand out a little bit more because they don't have as many.
They don't have no place to hide.
Yeah. I remember the first time I met you because I like my music loud when I work in the dark room. And I remember I went over there and asked you, is my music too loud? And Jake said,
what music?
What music?
Yeah, okay.